let me put it to you this way. If I didn't take the actions that I did, I don't know if I would be here right now. And I don't know what form that actually means. I'm just being real with you.
Sure.
Were there some suicidal thoughts? There was definitely a sense of giving up. There was definitely a sense of, I'm not worth shit. There was a sense of, no one would miss me if something had happened. There was a sense of giving up. There was definitely a sense of throwing in the towel. Absolutely. What form that would have taken, couldn't tell you. But I did have the courage to claw myself the hell out of that mess.
Today, we're continuing on the deep dive into the world of YouTube, content growth, and building businesses in the creator economy. And I couldn't be more excited about today's guest. Andrew Murdoch is the founder of YT Era. That stands for like YouTube YT Era, like generation, not YT Era like a crown that would go on a king's head. YT Era is a company that's helped YouTubers and entrepreneurs grow massive audiences and turn their channels into thriving, profitable businesses. Andrew has worked behind the scenes with some of the fastest growing creators you know, and today he's pulling back the curtain to share what's actually working right now on YouTube, what mistakes to avoid, and how to think like a real CEO when building a content-driven business. Whether you're just getting started or you're ready to take your channel to the next level, this conversation is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Let's jump in. Here's my conversation with Andrew Murdoch. Oh yeah, one more thing. The video with a hilarious conversation where Andrew made me adjust my camera angle to have more impact. You'll see the difference on this episode right away and all future episodes.
I'm so OCD. I got to say this before we start. You're using a virtual background right now?
Yes.
Is there any way where you can lower the camera or raise yourself? Just let's get you to fill the screen a little bit.
It's a teleprompter tripod, and so it's really big and heavy, and I can try it, but it's going to take probably more time than you want because
can we raise you?
I'm in a chair that's raised as high as it can.
Gotcha. Okay. So this is me being super.
What if I zoom in?
Yeah. Can you zoom in on yourself?
Yeah. Let me try that.
And then I'll wait till you're done, and then I'll explain to you why.
I think it's gonna make every dot and blemish. Let's see.
So can we angle it down? Can we pivot it down towards you a little bit or no? Is that possible? Because that would also help. I would love to see you fill the screen a little bit better. You're getting some free coaching right now.
I love this.
And then when we get settled, I'll explain to you why it's worth the effort. Oh, so much better. You look so much better, Matt. Okay. Can I explain why?
Yeah, let me change one thing. It's got a rolling ball type thing. And so now it's sitting crooked. And if you're OCD, high C personality in the disc profile, you would absolutely hate that.
Yeah, I'm OCD too, man. I get it. I'll let you do your thing. And then when you're settled, let me know and I'll help explain.
All right.
I promise once you have it set up, you won't have to worry about it ever again. Assuming you don't have to change your setup every time you do one of these interviews.
Yeah, that's the beauty of this. Let me try this again. Now it looks like I'm cutting off the top of my head.
No, that's great, man. That's great. That's so much better. And the reason why so what I just did with you, that's literally how I coach my clients. And there's a specific, so I'm sure you've heard of the saying before, people don't remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel when you said it, right? So when you create video content, you always want to be mindful about how is the viewer going to feel when they watch this content, because we're always sending subliminal messages, right? There's this thing called implicit egotism, which is the hypothesis that we all have an unconscious preference for things that we associate with ourselves, because we're paying attention to a lot cognitively and subconsciously. So when you are framed like this, can you still hear me?
Yes.
So when you're framed like this, you are sending a subliminal message to the viewer that you are insignificant and that they shouldn't pay attention to you.
Wow.
Yeah. And the same thing is true if, when I hate when people make this mistake where, they're in a hotel room or something and they open up their laptop and they're looking down at the laptop. So you're looking down. I want your camera's at eye level. So is mine. If you're looking down at the camera, you're sending a subliminal message that you're overpowering the viewer. And vice versa is also true. If you're looking too far up at the camera, now again, you're sending a subliminal message that you're inferior to the viewer and that they shouldn't have to pay attention to you. So you want to fill the screen, fill the frame, maybe an inch of space above the head, or if you have to cut off a bit of your hair, that's fine. But you want to fill the frame, camera eye level, be in focus, because you want to meet the viewer where they're at. There you go. Some free coaching.
That's wonderful. It's still a little crooked. I'll deal with it for this call. But it's funny. You're 100% spot on, because I have had a lot of students meet me and they're like, well, you're a lot bigger in life than you are on the camera. And that's exactly why. And I put this new teleprompter up. It's great because I can look right here and I have the screen right here. So it looks like I'm making eye contact. But that's been the problem. I have not adjusted it one time, and then I would have, hundreds of good results. So thank you for calling me out. I really appreciate that. I want to welcome you to this episode of I See Rich People. My guest today is Andrew Murdoch. He has already added value to my life in the 5 minutes prior to this introduction by telling me that I needed to adjust my camera so that I took up more space and was more front and center. And he's 100% spot on. So rather than bore you with reading his introduction, I'm going to let him do his own introduction.
Well, listen, you're either watching or listening to this episode right now because you're probably a professional, an entrepreneur, or a business owner, which means you struggle with the same foundational universal problems that every other business owner struggles with, which is getting your brand in front of the perfect prospect at the perfect time. And I'm an attention expert, and I chose the world's #1 video platform, which is YouTube, because YouTube's platform, the YouTube AI, is obsessed about this one thing more than anything else in the world. And that's how to get the perfect video in front of the perfect viewer at the perfect time. And in a moment, I'm going to share my rock bottom story with you to understand why exactly, what that kind of impact that had on my life, but more importantly, what kind of impact that'll have on you and your business as well.
Well, that's great. I wish everybody could do an intro like that. I think that definitely grabbed their attention. Thank you. So you mentioned that you had a tough time in your life, but what was going on before that? And this was in 2018 when this happened?
Yeah, at the end of 2018, I found myself at my rock bottom. I was
before we go into that, what was happening before then?
Before that, I was going through the motions. I was doing all of the things that people are supposed to do. I was, it's funny because when I look throughout my life, I could tell you that the happiest moments of my life is when I did what I knew would light me up or fulfill me. It's those moments where I felt like I started doing what everyone else is doing and following the crowd. It's those moments where I found myself in trouble. But yeah, 2015, 2016, 2017, I was just going through the motions, doing all the things that most people are supposed to do. And, got engaged, got married, and then found myself in a really bad situation in late 2018. Yes.
Were you working? Did you have your own business then? Or were you an employee, or what were you doing?
I was living in Vancouver, Canada at the time. And actually I was working in insurance. I was an insurance agent and actually specialized in a special kind of supplemental insurance, because unfortunately, what a lot of people don't realize with traditional insurance products is that they're designed in such a way to pay out as little as possible. And that's why these supplemental insurance products had been developed to fill that gap. So I was an insurance agent trying to protect people from their worst financial day imaginable. Yeah.
So then what happened in 2018 that changed things?
Well, I found myself kind of in a perfect storm where no matter what I did, it was always a mistake. No matter what I did, no matter what I said, I felt like I was stuck in a downward spiral. And no matter what I could do, I couldn't get off this sinking ship. And I had some really terrible moments where I was crying myself to sleep and not knowing how to fix my life. I was married to someone I couldn't stand. I was swimming in debt. My health and fitness was out the window. And I wasn't speaking very kindly to myself in those days. And it wasn't until I had the courage to reveal what was going on to my mom. My mom is a worrier, and I'm a worrier. I got it from her. And I hid a lot of the terrible things that was going on in my life from her because I didn't want to worry her. And then when I found myself between a rock and a hard place and just like in a corner, I finally started, revealing what my life was actually like to my mom. And she gave me the courage to do what was required to get myself out of that terrible mess. Yeah.
So health, relationships, your finances were probably okay, I'm guessing, with the
No,
insurance.
my finances were a
No,
disaster.
yeah, you said you were swimming in debt. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Wow. So you don't have to answer this, but I know a lot of people, when they feel that way, they feel overwhelmed. They feel kind of despondent, like there's no hope, there's no light at the end of the tunnel and no way out. Is that how you were feeling?
Oh, absolutely. Let me put it to you this way. When you're going through the shit, when you're, the old saying, if you're going through hell, don't stop.
Keep
But
going.
when you're going through hell, you don't actually realize how bad it is until you get out and get to the other side and have the perspective of knowing what you just survived. So I knew things were bad. I knew things were bad. I didn't realize how bad they were until it was probably maybe a year later or 2 years later when I actually started when I had a chance to actually sit with everything and actually process everything. I don't know why the human mind is like that. I feel like sometimes we can be a little, at least I know I was pretty slow, like pretty like idiotic, pretty like, what the hell is wrong with, but it took like a year or 2 years of really processing everything and looking back going, oh, that was bad. I'm really glad I survived that. So yeah, does that answer your question? Because that's the best way I can explain that.
Yeah. Did you ever consider suicide, or did those thoughts
It
ever enter your mind?
it was, I don't know if I don't let me put it to you this way. If I didn't take the actions that I did, I don't know if I would be here right now. And I don't know what form that actually means. I'm just being real with you.
Sure.
Were there some suicidal thoughts? There was definitely a sense of giving up. There was
Giving up.
definitely a sense of, I'm not worth shit. There was a sense of, no one would miss me if something had happened. There was
Wow.
a sense of giving up. There was definitely a sense of throwing in the towel. Absolutely. What form that would have taken, couldn't tell you. But I did have the courage to claw myself the hell out of that mess.
Were you drinking or using anything else to cope?
Not like, so I'm Canadian and I was living in Vancouver, and Vancouver has everything.
Yeah,
uh,
like most cities.
there's everything, but no, I don't actually have. I'm fortunate. I'm grateful. I
Yeah.
grew up in a household with an alcoholic father who had anger management issues, and then later on in adulthood, I married a woman who was addicted to alcohol and gambling, and she struggled with anger management issues. So I'm no psychologist, but I realized that our childhoods definitely has a lot of impact on our adulthood, and I had no idea to the level of that until I had a chance to actually process, yeah, like I said, over a couple of years of what actually transpired. But no, I can say that I didn't inherit, if that's a thing. I'm not the expert at this kind of stuff when it comes to addiction. I know friends, I have friends of mine, I know people who are experts in addiction, but thankfully I didn't absorb that. There have been times where throughout my life where I was drinking more than I should have. But when I
Mhm.
say I'm drinking more than I should have, I'm talking like a 1 or 2 drinks with dinner. I've gone through periods of that. And now I'm like 1 drink every 3 months kind of person, just because I don't actually enjoy it. So no, I wasn't turning to those addictive, under the influence type things too much in those days. No, I can't say that.
Yeah. I look at stress sometimes as, if you've ever had a can of Coke or bubbly water or something like that, it's like stress are the little bubbles that are held in there when we're keeping everything together. And that sometimes when we crack that, they kind of bubble off. I just got back from spring break and we got to go on vacation, and it was really nice. It was like all that stress kind of effervesces and it just kind of bubbles to the surface. And pretty soon after a week, you're like, oh man, I can do this again. I can go back. And it sounds like in your case, you needed a year or two to let those little stress bubbles float away.
I love that analogy. And the other way it's been described to me is sometimes people like to use the term recharge the batteries. That
Mm.
makes sense. But sometimes, periodically throughout your life, you got to replace those damn batteries. Those batteries are no longer good. You got to rip those suckers out, throw some new bad boys in there. That's another analogy I've found useful over the years.
Absolutely. So you kind of hit rock bottom. How did you turn this around? What was the pivotal thing that you started doing that made the most difference?
So I already hinted at it, but if I had to actually boil it down to a single conversation, I can actually do that for you right now. So I found myself married to someone who was very abusive. And when I finally decided to pull back the curtain and share some details with my mom, I was ashamed. And she's like, well, why didn't you tell me sooner? Or why have you been struggling with this for so long? Or and I'll never forget this. I said, well, Mom, you know the old saying, happy wife is a happy life. And her response to me was, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. And I got to paint you a picture. My mom never swears. Okay. She never swears. She is like a very like prim and proper, tiny little 5'2" little woman. And I've never heard her swear. So hearing her swear over the phone that day kind of jarred me. I'm like, whoa, you just swore. And it was that conversation. And then spending quality time with her that helped me realize that just because I made a promise to marry someone and to spend the rest of my life with this person, if they didn't honor their side of the promise, then it doesn't make sense to stay married. And my parents separated when I was very young. My parents separated when I was like 10 years old, around there. And my mom was married to an alcoholic for 17 years. So when I started being a lot more transparent with her about the situation, she flat out said, Andrew, I don't want you to go through what I went through. And it became very clear that, I was in a situation where I had to decide to not repeat history. And just to further send this message home, has someone ever said anything to you that jarred a really deep-seated memory that you forgot about a long time ago? Like, you're like, holy crap, have you ever had that experience, Matt, where someone said something and you're like, oh, wait a second, I think that did happen. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Does that ring a bell?
Can't think of anything right offhand, but I know what you're talking about, where you're like, oh, wow, yeah.
So that happened with my mom when, I don't know at what age memory starts to become active, but she told me a story so I'm her eldest. I'm the first child my mom ever had. And she said, when I was very young, like 2.5-ish, she said, one day I walked up to her and I said, Mommy, why did you marry Daddy?
Oh my goodness.
And she said that like pretty much knocked her on the floor. Like, can you imagine a new mom with her first child? I don't know what I said. I don't know what I heard that would have prompted that statement, but clearly I saw or heard something. And when my mom shared that story with me, I was like, oh shit. Like something in my memory went whoop, like something just woke. And I was like, yeah, that happened. I don't remember the specifics. I don't remember the circumstances, but I absolutely remember saying that to her at a very young age. So that kind of paints you a picture. And she didn't want that life for me. She didn't want me to go through 17 years of a toxic relationship.
Did you hold back from sharing it with her because you felt afraid of what she would say?
Yeah, and I was shameful. I felt deep shame that I had married the wrong person.
I think most people do that. I had a paramedic partner who was in an abusive relationship. And this guy, I mean, to look at him from the outside was hard as nails. You would have never guessed that his wife was abusing him. And unfortunately, he tried to kill himself. And thankfully, he wasn't successful. But it's really one of those things that it can happen to anybody, right? And reason, season, or lifetime, you meet somebody, you both go into the marriage thinking everything's going to be great. But there are times when, like you said, you marry the wrong person and they're not upholding their end of it.
You and I met at Genius Network, and I had a wonderful conversation with a fellow Genius Network member not too long ago about how his divorce was the worst thing ever. And his story is an amazing story. And I'm not taking anything away from anyone who says their divorce was the worst part of their lives. And then because we were sharing, and it was kind of my turn to contribute to the conversation, I shared with him, I acknowledge your experience, and this is the traditional experience that most people share. But in my experience, I had the complete opposite. My marriage was hell. My marriage was the worst. The divorce was incredible. I loved it. It was a rebirth. It was a freeing sensation. It was a new beginning. It was a reinvention. It was a time to take control of my life, because my life had felt out of control for so long by that period of time that I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to turn. It just goes to show you that life sometimes when you're going through hell, when you're going through that tough patch, perspective is everything, but framing the situation is everything as well, right? Like you can play the victim, or you can think about focusing on the variables and the factors that you actually have influence and control over, and then just taking action and doing what's required, because it might not be your fault that your spouse is misbehaving or that your spouse is abusing you, but it is your responsibility to do something about it. And my school of hard knocks was the fact that, listen, society is hard on women, society is hard on men for completely different reasons. And society says the man in the relationship, that we need to be the rock. We got to be the solid force. We need to be the immovable foundation of like the family unit. That is what society says. And so when my relationship was a disaster and things were falling apart, I felt like I had to clam up and keep all of this to myself, because I should be the rock. I need to be the steady force here, until finally I reached my breaking point and started sharing with my mom. And then she gave me the courage to do what I had to do, to leave. I didn't ask for a divorce. I packed my shit and I left.
Well, Andrew, thank you for being so vulnerable in sharing that story. I think a lot of people may get some internal power from that. And if they're in a bad relationship, say, you know what, it's not getting better. Maybe they've tried counseling, therapy, whatever, and it's just not getting better. And at some point, there's 8.1 billion people on the planet. If you're not with the right one, sometimes you got to cut your losses and move on. So
yeah. Yeah. And what does Joe Polish say? I don't think this is his quote, but what's the number one cause of divorce? Marriage.
Yes. So I'm guessing right now you're still single. You haven't met the next one.
I am in a beautiful relationship with my girlfriend. We've been together for 3.5 years, longest relationship I've ever actually been in. I'm still crazy about her to this day. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you climb out of this hole. You kind of got rid of the problem that was causing everything. And then where did you go from there? You're in Costa Rica now?
Yeah. So there are two things that helped me completely turn my entire life around. And one of those things was becoming a digital nomad. So I was sleeping on an air mattress in Vancouver when I left my ex, and my life was in shambles. And for the first time in my life, I'd actually accepted a remote position with an American tech startup company, and I was on their marketing team. And after some self-reflection, laying on that air mattress, staring at the ceiling, absolutely convinced I was the world's biggest loser, I came to this eureka moment, this realization that there's actually only 3 ways anyone can improve their financial situation. You can grow your income, grow your revenue, decrease your expenses, or you could do both. And so I decided to focus on both, because I was in a financial disaster. I had a bunch of debt, plus I had my ex-wife's debt as well. And so it was really bad. And one of the easiest ways for me to improve my financial situation was to get out of Vancouver, because Vancouver is one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in. So this was late 2018. And I at least had the common sense to know that I shouldn't be alone during the holidays. So I jumped on a flight, I gave things away, I donated things to charity, I sold shit, and the bare essentials went into a storage locker, and they've been there ever since. I haven't been back to that locker ever since. But when I left, I flew out east because my mom and my family relatives are out in Ontario, and I spent the holidays with them. And then I visited a friend and crashed at his house for a couple of months. And then I went to another friend's house and crashed with him, because I was essentially couch surfing, until I found myself sitting at my friend's kitchen table because they needed a house sitter. They had to go to Cuba to go to a friend's wedding, and they needed a favor. They're like, Andrew, can you come stay in our house, take care of our pets for 9 days? You're going to help us save $1,000. I'm like, what? $1,000 is what pet sitting, like that's what the kennel would charge you? And they're like, absolutely. I'm like, no problem. And I'm like an uncle to their kids. So I was like, yes, let's do it. So I'm sitting at their kitchen table getting some work done. And I'm like, wait a second, I wonder if this is like a thing. I wonder if I can like start house sitting for people on the side to reduce my expenses to the maximum level possible. Turns out it is a thing. I found myself on an article, a blog, reading about these house sitters and these different house sitting platforms. And I created a profile on one of those platforms. It's Airbnb, where you can leave the host a review. They can leave a review for you. And I found myself living as a digital nomad in Canada, the US, Mexico, Spain, England, Scotland, Panama, and Costa Rica. Those are the countries that I've lived in so far. And yes, I'm coming to you from an Airbnb in Costa Rica right now.
So when you say digital nomad, define that so that our audience understands that.
Yeah. So during COVID, everyone, not, I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people adjusted to working from home. Digital nomad is essentially a work from home person, except they're a lot more location independent. A work from home person will obviously benefit because maybe you can't stand to leave your pets for 8, 9, 10 hours a day, or maybe you have a sick loved one at home or an elderly loved one at home and you literally cannot leave the house. So you get remote work that allows you to work from home. This is essentially what a digital nomad is, except a digital nomad tends to do more long travel, meaning spending a month or 2 months or 3 months in a different state or province, different city, different country. And so a digital nomad is essentially a minimalist compared to someone who's working from home, because people like me, we live out of a bag. I mentioned earlier how weird it is that our childhood oftentimes will influence how we live our lives as an adult. Well, my parents separated when I was around 10 years old. So all throughout high school, I never had a singular home. I spent 1 week at my dad's, 1 week at my mom's, 1 week at my dad's, back and forth. And so I never unpacked. I lived out of a bag all through adolescence. And so now here I am, a 42-year-old man, and I'm still doing it.
That is truly amazing. I just interviewed Garen Jones, and he was talking about how when he was 4 years old, he had some traumatic events in his life. And then at 7 years old, and how those like two events, along with everything else, have shaped the whole structure of his life. It's very interesting. So yeah, you're doing what you did kind of at 10 years old.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't always been a digital nomad, but when I reclaimed this location independent lifestyle, my one word is freedom. I love it. I love booking a one-way flight, getting off the plane, hearing a new accent, hearing new stories, hearing new jokes, tasting new foods, feeling a different weather, exposing myself to a different culture that I didn't have exposure to before. At the time of this recording in 2025, there are some interesting things going on around the world. Let's just say that politically.
Sure.
And I feel like if we were more aware of different cultures and how other civilizations live their lives, I think we would live in a healthier society. That's just my 2 cents. Like having friends around the world. And I mean, well, let me put it to you this way. A lot of people are saying legacy media is dead, right? Well, in all fairness, legacy media kind of screwed up really badly. In recent months and years, they were, how do I put this? We caught them with their hand in the cookie jar, right? It's very obvious that legacy media was following their own agenda, and they were essentially a massive platform for propaganda in many cases, right? This is why podcasts have become so popular. This is one of the reasons why I love having friends all around the world, because I don't necessarily need to trust the news. I just need to message my buddy Tallis and be like, dude, what's it actually like over there right now? Because I'm going to trust him a lot more than a news outlet. So
yeah, there's no middleman to filter out what's really going on. It's pretty amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's great. So what are you doing now? You're working with YouTube and doing some of that. So let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So I said
how are you making a living?
Sure, of course. So I said there are two things that helped me completely turn my entire life around. One of those things was becoming a digital nomad. You probably heard the term before, burn the boats. Well, I feel like the boats were burned for me. Like there was no going back. And that was becoming a digital nomad. But the second thing, if I really look back and look at the two things that really turned my life around, the second thing was me getting addicted to self-improvement and professional development YouTube videos. That's the beautiful thing. A lot of people refer to YouTube as free university. I like to think of YouTube as the world's content resource library. So let's think about this logically. I'm a marketer. I have access to a lot of data, and that gives me an unfair advantage. That means I can make certain assumptions about people that I've never met. When you want to search for something, most people will go to Google. Lots of people are now going to ChatGPT, Claude, or Perplexity. I get that. The number one answer is still Google as of right now. But when the intent shifts away from search and towards learn, most people go to the free university. Most people go to YouTube. How do I write and sell a book? That's not something you would put into Google, because you have enough awareness to know that the answer to that kind of question is complicated and detailed. So you're going to go to the world's #1 video platform, and you're going to click on a video that you suspect will give you a very detailed response to how to write and sell a book, or whatever your query is, right? When I was at my rock bottom and I knew my life was a mess, I found myself addicted to the certain YouTube channels. And to this day, I can still point to very specific videos that helped me turn my life around. And it's all because these really successful online entrepreneurs and business owners saw enough value in the #1 video platform back in those days that they're going to grow their influence and grow their credibility and their authority if they grow a YouTube channel to grow their business. And YouTube's free and I was broke. So what are you going to do when you're broke? You're going to turn to like free resources. And the beautiful thing is the way YouTube is structured is that those content creators, they were fairly compensated for all of my views and watch time and the thumbs ups and the comments that I was leaving, because all of that engagement that I was leaving on their videos, they were being compensated by the YouTube algorithms, right? Because that's how YouTube is designed. YouTube will analyze everything you do and everything you don't do on the platform based off of that data, the positive engagement signals, the negative engagement signals. It can then form a picture of who you are as a person. It will form what's called a viewer's profile. And then it'll make recommendations to you based off of what you've watched and enjoyed in the past. So I binge watch all of these professional development and personal development videos. And we all know that if you're just laying back passively and just consuming content, you're not going to actually do anything. Thankfully, I did take what I was learning from these YouTube videos and I applied what I was learning to actually get myself out of this mess. Now let's fast forward to the time of this recording in 2025. A few years back, I founded a company called YT Era. And it's because I believe we're living in the YouTube era. YouTube had an impact on my life, and I think it'll have an impact on a lot of other people's lives too.
Yeah, before we get into that, I want to pause for a second. What were one or two of the most important people or videos that helped you turn it around?
Yeah, great question. So he's not super active anymore. Him and his wife and their kids, they have their second child on the way. They retired and moved to Panama, but the channel is still active or live, the last I checked. There's a YouTube channel called Project Life Mastery, and the content creator's name is Stephen James. And ironically, he's also a Vancouver boy. In fact, he lived about 25 seconds away from me in Yaletown, downtown Vancouver. And one of the first times I ever made a serious commitment and a serious investment in myself was joining his mastermind. And I remember paying him $5,000 to join his mastermind. And at the time, that was more money than God to me. For whatever reason, I felt like this was the right thing to do. And I just remember walking the 25 seconds down to the apartment building and taking the elevator up to his place. And then I was walking around this apartment where it was such a surreal experience because by this point, I'd probably binge watched maybe 200 of his YouTube videos. And, I could see like the Batman poster that he used to have in the background. And I was I was giddy. I was giddy because I'm like, oh my God, I'm in Stefan's apartment. And when we were all sitting in his living room and when he finally showed up and he greeted each and every one of us with a hug. And it was just one of the most transformational experiences of my life because I thought the most value I was going to get was from him. But I learned very quickly, it's like, yes, I got a ton of value from him. I'm not downgrading, but it was the community that he attracted. It's all the other people that I was forming relationships with in his mastermind. So a very long answer to your short question, but Project Life Mastery, without that channel, I don't even want to think about where I would be right now if it wasn't for the influence from that channel. Yeah.
I'm always grateful to people like that. And I love those resources that people can use. I had kind of a similar story in that I got in a bad place about, I think it's 2022. I was watching the negative news. I was, thinking World War III was going to break out. I was thinking economic collapse. I was hoarding food, kind of a prepper type mentality. And one day I'm sitting there scrolling the news in bed next to my wife, and she looks at me and she said, "Can you bring back Happy Matt? I really like him." And I was like, ouch. I mean, that really, like somebody sticks a dagger in you and you're like, maybe the road I'm not on is not the road I should be on. Yeah. And thankfully, I started listening to people like Jack Canfield from Chicken Soup for the Soul. He's got success principles, and reading Think and Grow Rich from Napoleon Hill. And it really is that what we put into our brains comes out in other ways. And I like to say that our minds are the greatest 3D printer on the planet, and most people have never found the on switch. But if you're feeding yourself garbage, you're going to get garbage out. And if you're putting in the good stuff is going to come out. And so when I changed, good things happened. when you change, good things happen. Nearly every guest on my podcast so far, and I've had, I think, 10 or 12 of them, they all have that same story that something was going wrong. They were on the wrong path. And that one thing was the inflection point that made things all turn around.
Yeah, yeah, that's really well put, because you do have to be mindful of what you're consuming. So Edgar Dale was an American education expert. And I think, if I remember correctly, it was, don't quote me, I think it was 1947 when he developed the cone of learning, or the pyramid of learning. And isn't it interesting that the worst form of learning, or the worst form of retention, is actually reading text? The studies have shown us it's a pyramid, and at the very top of the pyramid, the studies have shown us that on average, 2 weeks after you've read a book, you've only retained approximately 10% of what you've read. And as you move down that pyramid, then your ability to recall or retain the knowledge is dramatically improved. And watching videos was more like the 30%, especially if you're able to engage with the viewer, then it moves closer to 40 or 50% when you're watching a demonstration. But now the viewer's ability to retain the information dramatically increased because you're engaging with more human sensory input. So don't get me wrong, I'm a reader too. Think and Grow Rich, I think I've read that book 5 times. And there's a reason why certain books do deserve repeated visits, because again, our ability to retain information from text isn't that good. And as we change and evolve as human beings, you do learn to pick up things that you missed the first time around or the second time around.
Yeah. It's interesting. I teach that cone of learning on day 1 of our paramedic school and EMT school. And so it is 10% of what you read, you'll retain. And so the bottom, like it's either 70 or 90%, students will remember what they say as they do. And so the way that we do that is our students have the skill sheet and they start with, I'm checking the scene. Is it safe? And so what I tell them is don't just read it, say it out loud. And I think sometimes that's why affirmations, some people believe in them, some people don't. I don't believe in affirmations without action. There needs to be you saying something because you create it in your mind, and then you do something to create it outside, right? There's the inside reality and the outside reality, and you want to bring those together so that they're really like one.
Yeah.
And I took Napoleon Hill's book and I read it. I put my phone in the kitchen and I wouldn't take anything into the restroom with me for 6 to 8 months. And it was literally getting all the gold that I could out of Think and Grow Rich. And that was one of the key books. And like I said, Jack Canfield's Success Principles was the other one. But it's putting the good stuff in and the great stuff comes out. So, yeah.
Love that.
You have a very interesting, you shared some things that you should avoid if you're in marketing from the FTC. And this is probably not what you want to talk about. However, I think it's really important if there's somebody out there who is in marketing, they're doing some ads, they have Facebook ads or YouTube or whatever they're using. Can you briefly, maybe in 60 seconds or less, or however long you want to take, we've got about 15 minutes left. Can you give a little bit of warning about what's going on with the FTC and what marketers need to be aware of?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So marketers tend to learn about marketing from other marketers. And because everyone is always constantly trying to outdo each other and get better and better results, we find ourselves today in a world where lots of marketers are doing very illegal, non-compliant things because no one stopped to ask, wait a minute, is this compliant? Is this ethical? Is this legal? And I think marketers are in for a really rude surprise in the coming months and years. So it's no secret. All you have to do is Google, FTC press releases or FTC and the marketer's name to find out if the FTC has taken legal action against that marketer's name or against that marketer. So, okay. It's a subject that I've recently become very passionate about because I acknowledge that I was doing things that were not compliant. And it wasn't until I learned from lots of marketers. One of those amazing marketers that I've studied over the years is a man named Onyx Singal. And he's been in the game for 21 years. I think I first came across him 15 years ago, give or take, when I picked up one of his books and I was really blown away. He adds a lot of value, but he himself actually was sued by the FTC. And spoiler alert, if you're ever going to receive a lawsuit against the FTC, it's because they've already looked into you and they already know that they can win. So it's not about winning the case. It's about how do you minimize the damage. And
I
so
want to
he,
pause for just a second. I know sometimes when we say to people, you're doing something illegal, people stop, they put up their defenses. And so I might soften this just by a little bit and say, some people out there may have a blind spot because I don't think you're intentionally doing this,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
then when you say it that way, people go, oh, wait, what am I doing? And I certainly have my blind spots. If you want to know what mine are, go ask my wife. She'll be happy to tell you what my blind spots are. So some marketers may have a blind spot. So carry
Yeah,
on.
but I love that you said that blind spot. And from the experts that I've learned from, this is what they'll say that would kind of relate to that. It's like, the truth is, in the court of law, I didn't know isn't a defense.
Right.
So yes, it's a blind spot. There's, negligence or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I hear you. I totally hear you, Matt. You're right. And because many marketers haven't actually taken the time to stop and say, wait a second, what does the FTC Act actually state? How do I follow the FTC guidelines? And it's by any, like, I'm by far the expert on this topic, but I did decide to go down the rabbit hole and get educated. And now I find myself in a situation where I've had to update the marketing of my own company, which I'm happy, like, oh yeah, clearly, I mean, if I'm going to be responsible for someone else's marketing, clearly I should be following the rules with my own marketing. Otherwise, that would make me a hypocrite. That would make me really disingenuous, wouldn't it? So, and I also tend to work with industries, specifically financial services, that are hyper compliance sensitive. They're not just concerned about the FTC, they're concerned about the SEC, all these other three-letter government agencies. So as a professional marketer, it does fall on my shoulders to at least know the rules as it comes to the FTC, because that's the government agency that oversees all marketing and sales in the United States. And if your company is not located in the United States, but you sell to people in the US, then you still need to be aware of the FTC Act and ensure that you are following compliance, because otherwise they have the option of taking legal action against you because you sold to a US person.
Can you give us an example? I think you used real estate one time or results. Those seem to be, there's numbers involved. That tends to be kind of one of the triggers. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, that's probably the most obvious thing that we could talk about in the time that we have left. So earnings claims. Earnings claims can be explicit or implicit. And the FTC they're very concerned about people throwing around these crazy earnings claims. For instance, whenever you make a claim, it has to be substantiated. And if you actually look through the rules, you'll see that the hoops that you have to jump through to substantiate your client's earnings claims would likely almost never happen. Meaning, for you to actually say, hey, this particular client worked with me and made $1 million over the last 18 months, blah, 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 you would literally need access to their banking records to substantiate that earnings claim. How many people would be willing to turn over their banking records to their vendor? Not likely. So earnings claims is something to be wary of, because if you can't substantiate the earnings claim, then you would not be compliant to actually use the earnings claim in your marketing. Something else that people will mistakenly do is, like, so someone could leave a review for me or a testimonial for me on Facebook or Google or any of the platforms, or a freaking YouTube comment. I don't care. It could be anything. That does not mean I can legally go to that comment or that testimonial, take a screenshot, and then use that in my marketing. The customer, the client, they can do that. They can absolutely do that. As soon as I take the screenshot and include that screenshot in my marketing, I'm not compliant unless I actually got them to fill in a release. So there's a lot of hoops to jump through in order to remain compliant when it comes to case studies and testimonials specifically. And I got to be honest with you, I'm still learning. I'm not a world-class expert on this subject, but compliance isn't exactly a sexy thing to talk about, but I actually find it interesting. I know I'm a weirdo though. So
I think what you're doing though is you're shining light on a blind spot, or you're putting a mirror there so that they can see the blind spot and they can take action for it. And so you don't have to be an expert. You just have to be 1 to 2 steps ahead of anybody else. And I think you clearly are. So you're doing YouTube marketing. Are you the guy who puts all those ads at the front of YouTube?
No, good question. I believe that YouTube ads has a place to leverage that tool. I look at different marketing tools as like, let's make sure we're using the right tool for the right job. But we are not paid experts at YTR. We're organic experts. And there's definitely a time and a place where I would advise my client or customer to consider creating some YouTube ads. We don't actually find ourselves offering that as a service simply because we find ourselves working with clients and businesses that almost always have an internal resource or a vendor they're already working with, that they're doing their Facebook ads, their YouTube ads, their Google ads. So we don't actually use that, offer that as a service. We take on the burden of building the actual YouTube channel for the client. So the thumbnails, the video editing, the packaging, the channel management, the project management, the cybersecurity, because unfortunately YouTube channels do get hacked by nefarious actors. So we take care of all of that stuff for our clients. Yeah.
So then do you help your clients get exposure, or what's your strategy to help them increase their revenue?
Yeah. So we have a process where we identify, so think of a giant Venn diagram, two overlapping circles. If this circle over here is everything my client is good at or likes talking about, or their products and services and their viewers, that's all the information that's housed in this circle on this side. The circle on this side is our own internal IP that we do. We call it recon and research, where we go onto YouTube and we go through a process where we're able to identify the content that is working on YouTube right now. And then we move those two circles across so that they overlap each other. And then that gives me the sweet spot, as you will. And what we'll do is we'll create like the first top 10 video topics. We'll create the titles, we'll create the thumbnails. We'll then provide instructions to our client on, hey, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, we need these to be the first 10 videos that you're going to give to us. So there's no guesswork on the client's side. We've bent over backwards to ensure that we're asking her, because our client's time is valuable. We find ourselves working with very successful clients. Their calendars are nuts. So we really need to zero in and increase their ROI by making sure they're creating content that's most likely to perform on their YouTube channel. And then there's obviously an iteration process involved as well, where we're just going back and forth with them a lot over a long period of time and growing their YouTube channel to grow their credibility, their authority, their reach, driving traffic into their offers, their lead magnets, and getting more names and email addresses for their business.
That's really great. I like the Venn diagram analogy. That's great. Grant Cardone does a really good job of saying that everything starts with awareness. When you're aware of something, then you can take the next step. And so awareness is often, to me, the first domino. And it doesn't matter whether it's EMS education, YouTube marketing, whether you're selling a book, a podcast, whatever it is. If people are aware of you, then they can at least make a decision as to whether or not they want to click on the link, whether they want to watch the video.
Talk about that really quick. I love that you said that, because I agree with you. I think, so everyone has heard of know, like, and trust. Everyone in business understands that's accurate. And I agree. But I believe the know, like, trust framework is incomplete. It's only part of the story. Step one, because no one ever talks about the Grand Canyon of space that exists before the know stage, which is what you just said. It's awareness, it's visibility, it's discoverability. Right. You have to be seen before you can be known. So seen, known, know, like, trust, and then what's the last step? Business relationship. So if the leading domino is visibility, nothing else happens. They can't pay you if they can't discover you. So that's how I think of it. Yeah.
That is wonderful. I really like that analogy. Have you practiced that before or spoke to that before?
I give presentations on stages, and that was a recent framework that I developed that I now include in my talks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's spot on. I like that fifth one, that now they'll do business with you.
Yeah. Well, you gotta be discovered before they can even pay you, right? But that's the chain, that's the order of operation. This is why it's crazy to me that more businesses don't value YouTube. YouTube is the number one video platform, number one podcast platform, number one streaming platform. So this is something else that I really quickly, just to really nail this home. Matt, if you came across a professional or a business that didn't have a website, what would go through your mind?
They're probably not legit.
That's the answer I always get. They're probably a scammer. You should have some kind of online presence, a website, a landing page to show me what your offers and products are, show me some testimonials, give me a sense of what your business does. So how about, same question, but YouTube? How is a viewer or how is a prospect supposed to take you seriously if you don't have a YouTube channel somewhere where you can clearly demonstrate your knowledge on your given subject of expertise? That's how I look at the value of how YouTube has become more important than your own website now, because sure, website might show that you're a credible source, but a YouTube channel, if I went to a YouTube channel and I saw you have 112 videos, and you've got tens of thousands of subscribers and your videos are generating thousands or tens of thousands of views each, I immediately know that you're a credible source in your space. Because you can't fake that. Well, I mean, you can buy views, but that's really easy to find too. If I go to your video and I see tens of thousands of views and it's got one comment, I know you're buying views.
That's right. What would you say to somebody who says, I want to do YouTube, I don't know how to do it, or this was my fear, I was afraid to publish, I was afraid to launch. By the way, my podcast went live last night. I pulled the trigger, did the thing that scared me. I ran toward it. So that's partially to you. I published one of my YouTube videos because of you. So what would you say to that person?
That's a fantastic question, and congratulations. Congratulations. So
Thank you.
If you're in business, if you're a professional, if you're an entrepreneur, then I already know something about you. I already know you add value to the marketplace, because that's the only way you can be compensated for what you're doing in the marketplace. And if you're an active professional entrepreneur / business owner, you are adding value to the marketplace, which means, and if there's any apprehension around creating a YouTube channel, I would ask you this. Picture the person that you serve value to, that you add value to. Picture the individual that you serve. Picture the individual that you know you can change that person's life. Now, when you have that person in your mind, think about all the other people out there just like him or her. And now I want you to ask yourself a really important question. What happens to all of those people if you don't hit the record button? What happens to all of those people if you don't have a YouTube channel? What happens to all of those people if you don't have an opportunity to influence the decisions that they make in their lives? Because in 2018, had I not come across Project Life Mastery, I don't know where I would be right now, but I don't want to think about it. So think of all the individuals out there that you know you could turn their entire lives around, but you don't know that they exist. They don't know that you exist. Fix that.
Man, the chills have not stopped. Like, I'm still sitting here and still getting chills, because when you say what happens to them, I think of being on a boat and there's a lot of people who are drowning, and you have all the life rings in the world, and all you have to do is go like this and you can save them from whatever is killing them or hurting them. And if you don't have the gumption to pick up a life ring and be a hero to that person, then why are you existing? I mean, to me, I look at it like our lives are to help serve other people.
So let's use that analogy. Every single time you hit the record button, every single time you post a video on your YouTube channel, Matt, that's you throwing another life ring into the ocean, right? And then the YouTube AI, that's the ocean. The YouTube AI is responsible to make sure that the life ring finds the right viewer.
Wow.
But without you throwing the life ring into the ocean, then the YouTube ocean just goes, all right, I got nothing to serve these people then.
Right. I heard a statistic the other day, and you may know it better than I do, but there's about 8 billion people, 8.1 billion people on the planet. How many of those are actually creators? Do you know the number?
I don't know that number, but I know there are 2.7 billion active people on YouTube every single month. That's 122 million people every single day. And people consume over 1 billion hours of watch time on YouTube every single day.
I think the creator thing was like, there might be 800,000. And so some people are like, well, that's a lot of people to compete with. And the answer is no, it's not. Look at 8 billion people who are in need. They have a problem to solve. And if you're an entrepreneur, you can be that problem solver. You can provide the solution. You can scratch their itch. You can save them. You can get them out of a bad marriage. You can get them out of a struggling business or some sort of health issue that they're dealing with.
Yeah. So I work a lot in financial services. And if I'm speaking to a room of 100 financial advisors, I could literally give all of them a task and say, all 100 of you financial advisors, I need all of you to make a video for me. And I could give them the exact same title. No two of those videos would be the same. Every single video would be different. So, some people would make a 5-minute video. Other people would make a 1-hour webinar. And because of implicit egotism, which is the hypothesis that we all have an unconscious preference or things that we associate with ourselves, even if two advisors had two identical videos, advisor A is on one thumbnail, advisor B is on the other thumbnail, one of those thumbnails is going to resonate with me more than the other. So I'll click on thumbnail A, but maybe you, Matt, maybe you would have clicked on thumbnail B because you resonate more with that individual. It will never happen. There'll never be two identical videos. But even if there was two identical videos, they would both still add value in the marketplace because different viewers will click on different videos.
And that's so awesome. That's great. If people want to know more about you or learn about you, how can they get a hold of you? How can they find you?
Probably the easiest platform to connect with me would be actually LinkedIn, just because I find it's a lot less shenanigans. You know, I'm not too keen on interacting with a picture of a cat, Blazer 687 or whatever their alias is called. So if someone wants to connect with me, LinkedIn is probably the best. My company's website is ytera.com, ytera.com. And we have a free community that you could join. It's only for entrepreneurs, business owners, professionals. It's not for creators. There's tons of other groups out there that are designed for creators. This community is designed for the entrepreneur, and that's at ytforfree.com. And that's the word for, not the number 4, ytforfree.com.
ytforfree.com. That's FOR?
FOR, yeah. That's the free community, yeah. And then I have a free book, an ebook, that is designed for financial services. And that's at ytforfinance.com, where they can get a free PDF book called Mastering YouTube Marketing for Financial Services.
Oh, that's great. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to share with entrepreneurs?
No, we had a really detailed conversation here, Matt. I appreciate you, man. You're going to blow people away with these kinds of conversations. I would just encourage the entrepreneur to hit the record button, because any apprehension that you, the entrepreneur, is thinking right now, it's probably because you feel like something else would be a better use of your time. And I would challenge you on that belief, because if you have a product or service that adds value to the world, then I would say it's your responsibility to have a YouTube channel so that you can help that many more people and develop products and services that could potentially go to a wider audience. And when I say that is, maybe you're a brick and mortar company, that's fine, but what kind of virtual or information products could you develop to sell to a nationwide audience or a global audience? Let's leave it on. This is kind of an advanced thing, but for you, the listener and viewer that stuck around all the way to the very end of this interview, you deserve to get a little treat at the end, don't you? You get a bonus. So did you know that only 20% of the world speaks English? Did you know that, depending on what sources you check, did you know that there are approximately 57 million Spanish speakers in the United States? That actually makes the US the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world. Why am I talking about localization? Because YouTube is in the process right now, as we speak, of rolling out an automated dubbing feature, whereby if I'm a Spanish speaker in the United States and the YouTube platform knows I'm a Spanish speaker, as soon as I click on Matt's interview, YouTube will automatically dub the entire video into Spanish so that I can understand the content. That is an unfair advantage to business owners and entrepreneurs who have a product or service that would be accessible to a non-English speaking audience, because some really great quality content is unfortunately siloed away in English, and YouTube is bending over backwards developing these features for free. Nobody has to pay for this, for free, so that your content can reach a non-English speaking audience. So what are you doing with your business to monetize a non-English speaking audience? That is an unfair advantage.
That is great. I want to add my 2 cents, not to take what you just, that is absolutely phenomenal that YouTube is doing that. But I want to be a little bit vulnerable here, because I had my own fears about publishing on YouTube. I finally published on YouTube. For, I don't know, 16 years or so, we've not published. And so I put my first EMS video out there. It's still out there if you can find it. It's not, I'm working on it. It's a work in progress. But I pulled the trigger on that. I was very afraid. I worked on it way longer than I should have. I think it's polished. I think it's good. But I was like, I don't feel like I'm enough. I don't feel like it's edited tight enough. I feel like there's some ums and ahs. And in this generation of Instagram and Snapchat and everything else, that it would be criticized. And then the same thing with the podcast. Like, I literally was like, do I publish this now? What if it's not perfect? And so we all have these automatic negative thoughts that go through our head, or ants, as they call them. I think Tony Robbins has said that, but I certainly had mine. And the reason I'm doing this podcast, and the reason last night I hit publish, was because I had to overcome that fear that I had. And that I hope by stepping into my own light, it will help inspire other people who may also have this challenge. I have done a lot of stuff in special operations. I've rappelled off cliffs. I've, done hazmat, tactical stuff. And honestly, rappelling off a cliff was far less scary for me than it was hitting publish on my YouTube and my podcast. So with that, Andrew, thank you so much for all your wisdom. Thank you for showing me how to adjust my camera and make it so that I am more credible. You've been a great guest. I look forward to having you on my podcast again. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Hey, real quick, we're building a community of entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs. These are people just like you who want to start or grow their businesses and are ready to take the next step. If that sounds like something you want to be a part of, sign up and join us today.